Remember February 21st of 2022? When you still had hope?
おはよう、リンゴ。
おはよう、フィグ。
気分はどうですか？
まるで世界は5分前に作られたって気分？
Developed by Atlas, Soul Hackers 2 is the second installment in the Soul Hackers series, the fifth installment in the Devil Summoner series, and God knows what installment in the overall Megadami Tensei franchise. After the creation of 2015's infamous but overall favorably received Tokyo Mirage Sessions, co-producers and co-directors Eiji Ishida and Mitsuru Hirata were once again tasked with making a spin-off title that people would complain about, and thus Soul Hackers 2 was born. Ishida and Hirata were undergoing a momentous task. They were attempting to release a sequel to a game released in 1997 on the Sega fucking Saturn. Needless to say, they were attempting to sell this game to an entirely new generation, many who've never played a Devil Summoner game, needless to talk of Soul Hackers itself. So I guess the ultimate question is, did they succeed in their goals? No, of course they fucking didn't. Read the title of the video, man. Soul Hackers 2, for lack of a better word, kinda sucks. It's forgettable, it's very unambitious, and is plagued by a development team with no clear vision. But the problem is, Soul Hackers 2 sucks in a very particularly pathetic and mediocre fashion. This game is so soulless and boring that it actually sucks the life out of me to talk about it. It's impressive how genuinely unimpressive the game ended up being. This project had a remarkable team of designers/artists, an acclaimed music studio, the branding of an already established franchise, one of the best voice acting studios in gaming, and a decent presence of veteran game developers. But somehow, what we ended up actually getting is just the most lackluster shit imaginable. A boring story, genuinely garbage and half-assed gameplay, a very mixed soundtrack, and mostly alright visuals. And it wouldn't be that controversial for me to say that this is one of the biggest JRPG disappointments of 2022. It's sad because I wanted to avoid this game upon figuring out the Tokyo Mirage Session developers were behind it. Because in full transparency, the only time I ever enjoyed that game was when I was high as balls in my friend's apartment. But alas, I held out hope because I really wanted to support an Atlas turn-based JRPG on day one. And with how much I loved SMT5's release of the previous year, I decided to put my full trust in this company. And let me just say, that had to have been one of the worst financial decisions I made in 2022. I am so full of regret and shame. Ishida and Hirata are some ballsy niggas for doing multiple interviews, plastering their names all over this game. You can't attach yourself to some middling shit like this. And it's really crazy to me that they treat this game and talk about it like it's their baby. But when I play the game, I get this constant feeling that I'm looking at a game that desperately wants to be its own unique thing, but the people behind it are too afraid to really step out of their comfort zone. But before I talk about this game, let's get some of the ground rules out of the way. Firstly, I will, for the most part, not be discussing Soul Hackers 1. I purposely avoided watching the other YouTube pieces reviewing this game, so I have no idea how much of the market is spending their entire videos jerking off to Soul Hackers 1. But I ain't doing that shit. In fact, dear viewer, I hate Soul Hackers 1 and I dropped it after 12 hours. I think that game is doo-doo dog shit, and I know most of you want to kill me for that opinion, but that's fine, I just don't care. So, if you think I'm going to hate on this specific game because of your false preconceived notions that I'm a corny Megaton fan that hates everything new, you got me fucked up. I, at the very least, completed this game. Can't say the same for its predecessor. Secondly, the information I go off in this video is just going to be the base game. We are not talking about no patches or DLC. I am not reopening this game. I am not using any bandwidth to update this game. I am not wasting my mom's credit card on a fucking day one DLC. What you get is the base game. That's it. Now that we got those two things out the way, let's get going, shall we? Call me spiteful, but this game deserved to fucking flop. So I'm gonna spend the rest of the duration of this video shitting on the game. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it's not like there's much credit due anywhere. Therapy might be too expensive, but creating ridiculous video essays on niche topics, that's pretty cheap. I'm all about transparency with my viewers, so let me just be honest with you. Skip this section of the video and just go straight to the gameplay section. You see, Soul Hackers 2 has nothing going on with its story. The problem with me having to write this section of the video is very simple. How the fuck do you talk about something that has nothing of note worth commenting on? Listen, I put in 50 hours over the course of a month in playing this game. I spent a lot of time with it. With me being in my first semester of law school, I had very little free time. I play video games for fun, to be entertained. So I won't lie, when I put in 50 hours of my life into something this uninteresting in the midst of me having the least amount of free time I've ever had in my life, I'm going to be a little bit bitter about it. I simply cannot fathom the mindset of the people who think this game's story or characters are its strong suit. Did we even play the same game? So let me poorly set this up for you. Soul Hackers 2 takes place in a world that is about to face the apocalypse. Ion, a sentient life form that transcends human intelligence, had decided to intervene and prevent this from happening. Ion creates two human-like women that go by the names Ringo and Fig, with their sole purpose being the prevention of said apocalypse. Ringo and Fig dutifully begin searching for individuals who Ion has deemed necessary for saving the world. In the course of all this, Ringo ends up reviving 3 dead people using a method called soul hacking. And during the midst of all this hoopla, Fig obtains this mysterious force called a covenant. Covenants are very fucking important, as the one who gathers all 5 covenants will be able to summon the Great One and bring an end to the world. With our party members set and our goal of obtaining the covenants in sight, the game proceeds towards a dramatic story about society, technological progress, and interpersonal relationships. On the face of it, this game has the tools to succeed. For the first time in a while, an Atlas JRPG is giving us an all-adult cast. The game is rocking for a rather mature tone. Even the city we're thrown into, it's this bright, vibrant Neo-Tokyo overrun by rampant capitalism, crime, and stagnation. All the meanwhile, there's a constant war going on between 2 groups who summon fucking demons. And things in Earth are getting so bad, a literal AI god program has decided to step in. Hell, this game's even got a female protagonist if that's the sort of thing that appeals to you. Throw this in with some eccentric character designs and a cast of very talented voice actors, and at the very least, you have a decent story. Or you should have one. It's hard to fuck up when you have this much going for you. But the problem is, this game doesn't do anything with all this setup. The story and its characters are just not interesting. The game does near nothing with its themes, its pacing is egregious, like worse than Persona game level of egregious, and it feels like an experience where getting through this narrative is just a chore. For example, I know it's a bit outlandish to compare the pacing in this game to that of a Persona game, but it's honestly way worse than those games when it comes to this specific issue. I swear to you, nothing happens in this game until like 30 hours in. I don't think anything important happened until maybe the 4th arc of the game, where Iron Mask blasts Ringo's leg with shotgun pellets, collects the Chaos Emeralds, and then proceeds to run away. Another issue is the sheer amount of exposition dumps. It is fucking wild. You would think after a couple hours it would stop being so fucking prevalent, but nah. This is pretty much the Soul Hackers 2 experience.
They say there's a total of 5 covenants out there. Having one as powerful as it is, but the effects would only go as far as the individual could take them. Now, if someone were to possess all 5, then that'd be something else entirely. Gather up all 5 covenants, and you can...
So Ion is a non-human being born from a bunch of information, and you're like a splinter of it.
Mangetsu knew that it was only a matter of time before they came for the Purple Covenant too. So it was at that moment he chose to put 3 different branches of his research into practice. The first was the duplication of the Covenant, the second was the transfer of the Covenant, and the third was the sealing of the Covenant. Following his own theory, Mangetsu duplicated the Purple Covenant. In other words, he made a copy, or to be even more precise, a dummy.
So, you're all looking for Mangetsu Kuzunoha, the last host of a covenant.
We all went to the abandoned subway line in the Central District. Our mission was to find the last Covenant's bearer, Mangetsu Kuzunoha. But when we got to his hideout, all we found was his journal, and a bunch of stalkery pictures of Arrow.
There are 5 covenants: red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Mangetsu had purple, Iron Mask's was blue, Milady carried the yellow, Saizo's was green, and Ichiro Anda had red.
Keep in mind, the developers admitted in an interview that they apparently cut exposition out of the game. Yes, in a game where almost all the dialogue is expositional, this was the result after they made cuts to it. In fact, pay enough attention and you will notice the annoying trend in this game where characters literally just repeat themselves for multiple cutscenes in a row. It's almost as if they have nothing of value to say. Not to mention, there are just random moments in this game's story where the writing takes an absolute nosedive. Take for example, the scene where Fig allegedly died after the confrontation with Iron Mask. Now, set aside the fact that everyone with a brain already knew this was bullshit and that Fig would be alive somehow. The fact that Fig just refused to tell anyone about this body double makes no fucking sense. There's actually no logical reason provided by her as to why she told nobody. I mean, there is a reason why she did this, but it's mostly just because the writers wanted to very cheaply get your emotions riled up for a fake death scene. Or, an even more egregious writing decision is when it's revealed that Milady actually was fully aware that the current Iron Mask was fake, but she didn't say anything. Again, no logical reason for this. Just another example of the game trying to throw a twist at you and making itself look stupid in the process.
This is an unjust world, a false world. Let's destroy it together.
Miyauchi and the boys were smoking the good shit when they planned this game's story out. In fact, it feels as if the writers are willing to regularly just throw characters under the bus to progress the story. In fact, perhaps the greatest crime of this game is its characters. Outside of Ringo and maybe Saizo, there's not much to write home about here. I think Ringo's a pretty solid protagonist. Her personality and curiosity with humanity is this game's saving grace. I adore her interactions with almost every character in the game. She's great. But other than her, everyone kind of sucks. Seriously, if I put Ringo aside, what does this game have to offer? Arrow is what would happen if a silent self-insert JRPG protagonist actually talked and interacted with the world. My headcanon is that when the game was being pitched to Atlus, the developers simply lied and said Arrow was the real protagonist. It's actually criminal how he rarely evokes emotion out of me. Saizo's actually okay, one of the better characters in this game. His relationship with Ash feels genuine and I honestly loved seeing those two on screen together. I mean, I have mixed feelings on Ash, but you win some, you lose some. Milady? I don't give a fuck about Milady. Fig is actually a hilarious case of desperation on the part of the writers. She goes from this really boring character whose only reason for existence is to be a useful tool for the plot, to becoming this actually very stupid and unsympathetic character near the end. Just absolutely wild watching this lady decide to turn on the entire group just because she loved Raven. I mean, It's pretty obvious she's got a thing for Raven, but it's just the lack of build-up that makes it so hilarious. The game doesn't really work for these moments, so I can't really be sympathetic to a character like Fig acting completely asinine. Oh, and while on the topic of Raven, can we just give this guy an award for most obvious villain of all time? Wow, this game that has like 8 relevant people in it, and 5 of those relevant people are in our group of allies? I wonder if some of the reoccurring characters not in our group might be the bad guys. Oh, and shout out to my boy Zenon. Zenon, easily a top 3 character in this game. Not only does he never actually speak, which is great because he never wastes my time with filler dialogue and exposition, but when he does speak, it's just him letting out this really raw Call of Duty zombie scream. It's hilarious. Yeah. I'm sorry guys, this game's story isn't worth any genuine critique. To this day, I haven't even gotten the Chew ending, nor have I watched it on YouTube. I am so disinterested in this game's story that I didn't even look up the Chew ending for this video. Do you know how insane that is? And you know what? You shouldn't waste your time with this game's story either. There's nothing to write home about. Honestly, I'm surprised you decided to watch the story segment of this video after I told you not to. Because this section was about as coherent and well put together as this game's story. Anyway, let's skip ahead to the actual gameplay, because boy oh boy, do I have some opinions on that. You know, a bad story isn't actually the death of a Megaton game for me, nor is the death of most games for me. Regardless of how much I complain about the so-called story of this game, the one thing in a video game that could keep my attention is if the game aspect of said video game is good. Unfortunately, Soul Hackers 2 suffers from the most insane case of mid I have ever seen. I genuinely hate using the term mid in any serious fashion, but this really is just a mid-ass game. Soul Hackers 2 reeks of some of the most uncreative and uninteresting gameplay I have seen in a JRPG in a while. It lacks originality, and it does a poor job in emulating the contemporaries it takes obvious inspiration from. Usually repetitive combat in JRPGs can be mitigated because the developers understand how to break up monotony, whether it's Persona 5 letting you do social links between dungeon visits, Final Fantasy X giving you really satisfying story beats after a 2-hour grind, or even Xenoblade 3 granting you the freedom to mostly boost your levels if you choose so. In essence, any decent developer understands that pure grind usually isn't enough. It's usually only really tolerable if the grinding itself is that fun. So with all this considered, what does Soul Hackers 2 decide to do to break up the repetition? It decides it's going to introduce half-ass wannabe Persona social link segments, shove in story bits that move the plot 0.4 meters at a time, and heavily incentivize you to grind a boring side dungeon. You starting to see the issue here? Under normal circumstances, this gameplay could be a lot more tolerable, but the problem with the game is that nothing feels satisfying. All those hours I spend in the dungeon grinding or trying to find a path, what am I rewarded with? Maybe a cutscene that barely pushes the plot forward, and when I'm not in the main story dungeon, I'm reminded repeatedly by the game that I should go and grind a different dungeon that is even more boring than the one I just got out of. And if I don't do either of those, I'm expected to do these lame-ass hangouts at the bar or something? You're starting to see the issue here? Soul Hackers 2 and its boring gameplay are put under a fucking spotlight, and the sheer tedium of it all is exposed because the game is really bad at giving you any other activities to do. But it's not enough for me to simply rag on the game. I need to actually somewhat describe my issues with it. I will proceed to do that. I'm gonna start with the most basic and important aspect of any JRPG, the battle system. This game has decided to abandon its predecessor's roots and thrown all that grid combat bullshit out the window. And honestly, based as fuck. Did not care for the OG game, and I am glad I don't have to see that in the sequel. Instead, Soul Hackers 2 decides to just copy and paste Persona's battle system, and it leads to very boring results. Just like in Persona or any other modern SMT, you're emphasized to attack enemy weaknesses. Stacking weaknesses allows Ringo to activate a special technique called a Sabbath. This is essentially just an all-out attack that activates after all party members have taken their turns. It's honestly the most important part of the battle system, and you would do yourself a major favor taking advantage of what basically amounts to free damage every turn.
Rush him!
No way!
Some nerve.
Each of your party members also hold devices called comps, which are used to summon demons. These comps are pretty important because whatever demon you have equipped will shape your stats and affinities. Comps can be enhanced with all sorts of special effects, stat boosts, and other customization options. Ringo's comp specifically is important because her comp has access to the commander's skills and Sabbath attacks. However, despite all the customization options they do provide in this game when it comes to battling, and despite the attempts you can see at them trying to be different, first off, this combat system stops being exciting really fucking quickly. I remember when I first started the game, I literally wrote in my notes, how long before I get tired of Sabbath attacks? And wow, I was bored with this shit after 2 days of playing. It looked cool for a little bit, and then it just became an annoyance. Little did I know that my opinions on Sabbath attacks would eventually extend to all manner of fighting in this game. This battle system feels way too simplified. Every fight boils down to hit weakness and Sabbath. And I can hear the shrieks of the contrarians telling me, well, that's every Mega 10 game, bro. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, but this game doesn't even pretend like there's anything more to it. I'm so sincere that everything you've learned in the first 2 hours of playing this game could probably translate to the final boss flawlessly. You do not need to know how to properly engage with this game's combat system, and you know what? Why the fuck would you? It's a waste of fucking time. At least uninventive and stereotypical turn-based combat in other JRPGs can be offset by stuff such as interesting dungeon design. Oh, and trust me, we'll get into a discussion of this game's dungeons, difficulty, or fun exploration. But Soul Hackers 2 does nothing to cover up the shallow nature of its combat. And when I call the combat shallow, I'm not just referring to the standard encounters you get while fighting mobs. No, the shallowness of this game's fights can be seen from every single boss fight too. Persona 3 Dungeon Masters, step aside, because I have an actual show for the worst boss fights I have to slog through. At least those P3 fights were interesting. Sure, they were artificially hard, requiring specific and dumb methods for winning, but I felt engaged at the very least. But this game, they have no idea how to provide a unique challenge for every boss fight, so every boss is the same parlor tricks and borderline cheap gimmicks employed to force a challenge. Oh wow, a boss fight where the boss gives themselves resistances across the board and arbitrarily increases their action counts? So cool. It's very telling that I played this game perhaps 4 months ago and I can't even name to you any unique gimmick or thoughtful idea put into any fight. They all relied on this same fucking formula, and I really challenge you to find a fight that didn't. Even the final boss redeployed and recycled gimmicks. I wish I was exaggerating. I'm not.
Are you serious right now, bro?
And you know, I honestly suspect that they didn't do much QA testing with these bosses either. I feel like they just made bosses hilariously simple and saved themselves the time. I know this is anecdotal, but I got fucking soft locked on one of the bosses in this game. One of the few times I actually lost a fight in this game, it was because I figured out how the boss's weakness and decided to just auto attack until he killed my team. Ringo had already died, so I just figured I'd reset by letting the boss kill me. But as it turned out, Melody wouldn't fucking die because she had Reflect Physical. But as it also turned out, this boss, who was the only demon on the field, could only do physical moves. I couldn't die. And seeing how I couldn't die, there was no chance for me to use Original Flame and revive my teammates. It also doesn't help that Ringo was dead, so I couldn't use a commander skill to swap out my demon. And if I remember correctly, I wasn't about to spend a couple hours trying to beat this end game boss with a level 41 Futsunashi. So I was stuck in a loop of Melody getting hit. And since no one decided, hey, maybe we should give the boss an almighty move or something non-physical, I had to reset the fucking game. I know my situation was unique, but you would think they'd have thought about the possible consequences of having a boss that can only do one type of damage in a game where you can't swap out demons unless Ringo is alive. This game's bosses reek of laziness in every facet. It's why something as simple as this could be overlooked and released. Again, I know it's anecdotal, but this game's developers didn't really put much effort into boss fights. Additionally, this game is easy to a fault. It's so easy that you may reach the point where you actually consider not taking advantage of every single tool they give you because it would make the game too easy for you. For example, let's look at encounters. Now, aside from the fact that engaging / running away from encounters in this game feels janky as hell, let's talk about what the actual consequences of an encounter are. If you slash an enemy, there's a chance you'll start with an advantage and your party member will do damage to all enemies. Under this system, as long as you have the enemy down, you're either getting bonus damage or first turn. But what happens if the enemy engages you? Under normal circumstances, this should mean that all of the enemies are going to take turns pummeling you. Because let's be real, if you actually let the enemy get an advantage, you probably deserve a severe disadvantage. But in this game, the enemies don't even all take their turns. Yes, you could have 5 enemies against you, and maybe only 1 or 2 of them will actually hit you while having a turn advantage.
Not good.
Let us go!
This seems like a minor thing, but it speaks to this game's balancing philosophy. In almost any other game where the enemy gets the first turn, it's a little bit worrying. It should be. I was actually disappointed the first time an enemy got an advantage and only 1 of them hit me. I am so desperate for excitement with this game that I am going full sub and begging to be hit harder. This game sucks because even in a situation where you clearly are a fuck up and deserve to be punished, you can just brush it aside. I find that beyond absurd. And this permeates all aspects of the gameplay. Another example, you lose a fight? Don't worry, this game has an item that you can use to fully revive and heal your party members after you've lost the fight. And this item, named Original Flame, isn't rare, as I found quite a few of them in my very casual playthrough. I wasn't looking for this shit, I didn't use any guides, these items just came to me. It got to the point where I pretty much banned myself from using Original Flame because I wanted some semblance of a challenge. I know I played this game on normal mode, but Jesus Christ. I expected to die a couple times, not coast my way through 95% of the game. It just feels like there's no consequence for being bad at the game. And that would be more acceptable in a story-driven game where developers are more eager to see you progress the story than master the gameplay. But we've already touched on the story. This game suffers from a severe case of why the fuck would I do the side quest syndrome. Listen, I can admit I have never been the guy who went out of his way to do side quests in games. I know a lot of people do, but I've never been that person. I've always been super goal oriented and I just wanted to push the main story. Because in my pea-brain, that's the pace the game is quote unquote meant to be played at. Not a logical thought process, but it's just how I think. But here's the thing, I am not married or beholden to this thought process. My recent playthrough of Xenoblade 3 saw me doing an absurd amount of side quests, and I usually never do that shit. And the reason why I was doing so many of them was actually rather simple. The developers knew how to motivate me to do them. My biggest issue with side quests in video games has always been when a developer doesn't streamline the quests or make it easy to do them. Developers often take the side aspect of this too literally. I hate having to go out of my way to do a side quest. Xenoblade 3 does something really fucking simple. They make the side quests less of a chore or an annoyance. They simply put the information on your screen in an easy to access fashion. You can make side quests your priority at any moment in time. I can't tell you how many times in a goddamn JRPG I just refuse to do side quests because either the instructions are vague as fuck or I'm required to repeatedly open up a quest log. And it doesn't help that the quest rewards in this fucking game are normally fucking dog shit and not worth your time. I need you to understand why this is so fucking tedious. Me, as the player, I'm being asked to travel to a certain NPC in-game, waste time dialoguing with a boring conversation, receive overly specific instructions that usually range from generic fetch quests to kill 4 of these enemies in an area you completed 8 hours ago, constantly be checking my quest log to see if I am doing the right thing, and then after doing all that, finally fucking find the item or enemy I was asked to find, only to be asked to return to that same fucking NPC and deal with a 50-50 chance that this fucking mentally deranged cow is gonna ask me to do another task. And this whole scenario I just presented, this is under the assumption that the instructions you're given are actually clear. And you know, I'm not even particularly peeved at the generic kill 6 specific enemies type quests. It would be more bearable if the quests weren't insanely tedious and the game rewarded me with something other than useless shit. Oh wow, a 20% health recovery and a copy of The Last of Us. Really needed this. Please. Side quests don't need to be fucking complex or even fucking good. But if you're gonna give me time padding nonsense, I would like if you streamlined it and made it simple to do. Otherwise, fuck off. I finally found it. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. With my limited experience with this series, I have ascertained that these are the worst dungeons in the history of Mega 10. This might be the part of the video I am the most passionate about, because this game actually made me rethink my opinions on dungeons entirely. A lot of people are not going to agree with this video, because Soulhackers 2 is really good at being inoffensive. It's so unbelievably average in so many areas, refusing to go too far or overstep a boundary. So when you hear me ranting like this, people are gonna not agree with me and not hate it as much as I do. But if there's one aspect of the game I know I'm gonna get universal agreements on, it's that they absolutely phoned it in on the dungeon design. I used to hate on the dungeon design in SMT Nocturne Digital Devil Saga, Nocturne especially. Those PS2 era games that throw you in a fucking maze full of random encounters and would put you through hell to finish a dungeon. I'd actually go on to tell people how much I hated these dungeons. And you know what? At the time, I wasn't lying. Spending hours trying to figure out these fucking dungeons was honestly really frustrating at the time. But you know one thing I have never said about any of those confusing clusterfuck mazes? I have never called the dungeons boring. Those dungeons, at their very worst, at their very least, managed to elicit fucking emotions out of me. That emotion being pure rage, unadulterated rage. Not many games could elicit the emotions I felt while sifting through game facts, and sometimes even watching a YouTube video just so I could figure out a dungeon. But you know what? I remember those levels. I have a sense of nostalgia for them. And furthermore, a lot of my frustration came down to a fucking skill issue. I just sucked. And you know what? Fine. I can accept that. Now, you may be wondering, why the fuck is this guy talking about a bunch of old ass games that were released when he was a toddler? While he's in the middle of a video discussing Soul Hackers 2? The reason why is because those games made me feel something. Sure, it was anger, but it was something. This game's dungeons can't even evoke a single emotion out of me. There is not a single redeeming quality about this game's dungeons. They are bad, and not even in a notable way. They aren't so bad it's good, they are just garbage, and that's all they'll ever be. First off, all the dungeons look bland and boring as fuck. Here at Atlas, we provide you with a wide variety of dungeons to search through. We had the most creative minds spark the ideas such as shipping yard, a forced trip to the Axis, an abandoned subway, an abandoned business tower, another forced trip to the Axis, and another fucking shipping yard. You know, there's a way to do these overused tropes and dungeon ideas without being this uninspired. People love to shit on SMT5 for how boring some of its areas look, and they aren't really wrong. But if you want to see a game that isn't trying, this is it. There's nothing interesting here. Nothing. No unique landmarks. Very boring color palettes across the board. And I promise you, you'll remember most of the dungeons in this game 2 months after playing. I sure as hell don't. And aside from how patently boring and generic it all looks, the actual dungeon design is fucking asinine and doesn't fire off a single neuron in my brain. When I first started playing the game, I actually thought the simplicity of the dungeons was acceptable. I thought that it was starting off slow, but it would somewhat ramp up and slowly become more interesting. Most of Soul Hackers' dungeons quite literally boil down to trial and error nonsense. You don't have to sincerely think about what you're doing for almost all of the dungeons, and that's for the dungeons where they actually do bother inserting a challenge or puzzle of some sort. There are parts of this game where there isn't even that. Arrow's special sector is especially sinful in this regard. Nigga, you quite literally just walk in a straight line. And then, when we do have puzzles, they are never satisfying to complete. Central District Abandoned Line and Subway Line 14 are absolutely fucking criminal in this regard. Holy shit, Billy. Walking back and forth for specific items held by random demons in specific rooms? I am so excited by this gameplay. And I haven't even gotten into that. What the fuck happened to the simple concept of opening chests in dungeons? What the fuck is this lazy bullshit where there are random demons all over the dungeon? You have to walk up to these motherfuckers to do demon negotiation, collect random items, get health restores, and even get key items? I'm absolutely astonished that they managed to force all of this into randomly spawned demons all over the dungeons. But they covered it up by saying it's your party's demons doing scouting work. This right here is generational laziness. I can't even conceptualize how they thought that this was in any way superior to the 30 years of precedent video games have given us on dungeons. And now that I mentioned these scouting demons, I'm gonna have to purposely cut off this rant on dungeons just to complain incessantly about demon negotiation. You may tell me it's poor video essay structuring to throw in another topic in the middle of the current one, but this is my video, so fuck you. I see it as my duty to call this bullshit out right now. Demon negotiation being held behind these completely random demons is the worst demon recruitment system I have ever seen in a Megaten game. I am not joking. This is a complete debasement of the demon negotiation system, and everyone should be frowning upon this very hard. I understand that they wanted to make demon negotiation less painful and more accessible, but at this point, what even is the point? There's no real negotiation here. You comply with one of the demands and they just join you, like that. What type of pussy-ass demons are these? There's no haggling, there's no RNG, there's nothing. It's so boring and pointless. Why even bother having a negotiation system if you aren't really gonna negotiate? I honest to God prefer the older, frustrating Megaton games where the demon stole 300,000 of your currency and then proceeded to one-shot one of your party members. Yeah, it was RNG nonsense, but man, it had character. It made the games unique. This new shit is just... why? The idea of negotiations outside of battle is also just an atrocious idea in and of itself. Was someone in the dev team just too lazy to implement a negotiation mechanic into the actual battle? What other reason is there? Crazy how this game is part of a spin-off series that is under the umbrella of a franchise that is one of the founding fathers of the monster collecting JRPG genre, and yet it fails to recognize one of the core tenets of the genre. Part of the excitement is the difficulty and randomness in obtaining monsters. Look at fucking Pokemon, man. And not to mention, when you do decide to entertain this terrible recruitment system, it's incredibly frustrating to recruit demons because you have no control over the spawn rates of these scouting demons in the overworld, and you also have no control over whether or not said demons will have that damn negotiation symbol over their fucking head. Your recruitment of demons is being held behind multiple layers of unfun RNG. If we're going to randomize my odds of getting demons this hard, at least make it entertaining. In Persona 4 Golden, I'm deadass shuffling cards. This ain't no negotiation. Atlas said, fuck you, it's casino time. And you know what? That engaged me. P4G's cards could be bullshit or annoying, but at least that mechanic made me feel some. Hell, S&T demon negotiation is historically fucking random, but at least there's a rhyme or reason to some of it. You gotta do some push and shove, maybe deny a request, fulfill one. But this game decides it's going to make accessing the recruitment system more annoying and inconsistent, and on top of that, if you do some negotiation, the demons are going to be pushovers and just join you instantly, taking out all the fun out of the experience. When it comes to dungeons, I know it seems like I'm saying a whole lot of nothing, and that's because I am. You who has played the game, do you remember any dungeon except maybe the 24th Ward Municipal Towers? Seriously, tell me your favorite part of this game outside of that, because I sure as hell can't. Listen, I have been quite negative in this section in particular, which is saying a lot considering how I've discussed this game as a whole so far, but I can give credit where credit is due. I mentioned mere seconds ago, but the 24th Ward is easily the best and only half-decent dungeon in the entire game. After several hours of visually unimpressive slop and completely unengaging dungeon puzzles, this area was genuinely a breath of fresh air. This dungeon is essentially broken up into two main parts, the sea area and the bone area. I love the sea area. It's some of the most unconventional dungeon design in the whole game. I can't even exactly describe to you what it is, but I don't really care. It just looks really fucking cool, especially the 4th floor of the sea area. It's this darker, more dimly lit area with really visually appealing glowing plants. It's a shame this is the only floor that has this, but it's some of the most visually stimulating shit in the game. With a character design like Ringo's, you'd think they'd have thought to play on with some more bright and slightly more daring designs in their dungeons like this. But unfortunately, that's not the case. The only problem I have with this area is that the puzzle in this dungeon is not that much better than anything else shown off in the game thus far. And what actually makes this weird teleportation puzzle even more annoying is the fact that you have to deal with a fucking loading screen every time you engage with it. I made the decision of legally purchasing this game for my PS4 as opposed to blatant piracy, and I was rewarded with annoying load times. This would have been surely mitigated if I pirated on my PC for free, but I digress. There's also the bone area, which is honestly a very fitting final area for the game. It has a rather interesting bone design. My 13-year-old vocabulary is failing to convey this, but the area is aesthetically pleasing. Just trust me on this. It's not a complicated dungeon to navigate, but it does a really good job of putting weight on the player, letting the player know that their journey is about to conclude. It doesn't really force any gimmicks or puzzles on you. You just have to spend your time sifting through the paths to talk to certain side character ghosts and to unlock some doors. These interactions aren't meant to be anything special, except, you know, determining what fucking ending you get. Before I bought this game, I made a promise to myself that I was not going to look up how to get a good ending in this game. I was so deeply determined to just play the game out and let my natural choices guide me. But my fucking god. If this isn't one of the most annoying and stupid ways to determine the ending you get in a game, I don't know what is. Listen, I'm not exactly a fan of endings being determined by choices you make in the last 2 hours of play, but there's a way to do it where it won't completely aggravate me. First off, you could put a very simple warning to the player that you're going to make a very important decision soon. I recommend you save here and keep that file. I know Persona games do this. I can see why some people would have beef with doing it this way, as it may kill immersion, but I would have personally been perfectly fine with that being implemented here. Furthermore, I have this revolutionary idea. How about when we are going to do some shit like this, we make it exponentially obvious what path we are choosing to go down. It's so absurd to hide a certain ending behind this type of shit. Key moments of player choice should be marked as such after an entire game of your choices meaning fucking nothing. I can't really argue against the people who will claim it was very obvious to them, but it wasn't completely obvious to me. Or maybe I knew it was important, but I was so demotivated by this game that I couldn't even be fucked to truly care. It's been a while since I played this trash, so sorry my memory's a bit foggy. I think there's an elephant in the room I still haven't addressed. I can't believe it. I haven't even gotten into the true Satan of this game's dungeon design, the goddamn soul matrix. Whoever decided to put this glorified time pattern into the game does not deserve to be allowed near a video game development team for the next 25 years, or roughly the time span since we got the last Soul Hackers game. The Soul Matrix, also known as the Axis, is this game's optional side dungeon. This is the area for you to grind when you're not progressing the main story. It gives you a deeper look into the past events and traumas that form the personalities of our main characters. There are 3 separate sectors. They are dedicated to Arrow, Melody, and Sizer respectively. Progression of the Soul Matrix is dependent on the soul level and whenever the game arbitrarily decides you've moved far enough along in the story. The Axis is cool for about the first 15 minutes, and then it gets boring really quick. The realization that this is all you're gonna see for multiple hours of your playthrough sets in really fast, and it's not a pleasant feeling. Yeah, it's optional, but believe me when I say they expected you to waste your time here. And this shit really adds an additional 15 hours to your fucking playthrough if you actually try to keep up with it. By the time you reach the final hours of your first playthrough, going to this area is going to be a complete fucking chore. You may even decide to just forego the bonus stat boosts and abilities in favor of just focusing primarily on the story. If you did that, good on you. You are smart. The problem with the gameplay loop in the Axis is that it takes everything you already hate about regular dungeons and somehow makes it worse. In terms of how it looks, it's extremely boring. Yeah, it looks okay at first, but it really is the same thing from beginning to end. I do not see how hard it would have been to switch things up. Fuck, we've seen how you do this in Persona 3. Each area of Tartarus, has at least one thing changed and look visually different. Sure, Tartarus sucked, and it was one of the main things I hated about Persona 3, but it had at least that going for it. Or hell, even Persona 5 Mementos had a decent amount of changes throughout. But what does the Axis do? How can you even properly distinguish the floors from each other? You can't. The only reason you know what floor you're on is because of whatever garbage puzzle you may be doing. Speaking of garbage puzzles, yeah, this dungeon has a couple of those. Same exact issue as the regular dungeon in this regard, it's mostly trial and error nonsense rather than anything genuinely engaging. It just makes traversing a very annoying dungeon even more annoying, and keep in mind, they are so lazy that they essentially copy and paste the same ideas across all 3 sectors. So whatever challenge you encounter inside the sector, it will show up in Melody's sector in a slight variation. And not to mention, these dungeons are so fucking unfun to navigate. Like, look at this fucking map, bro. Nigga, why? What the fuck is this? I just had no motivation to actually see this shit through. I did not want to beat these dungeons or reach the end. But I did actually end up beating one of them. And let me just say, I don't remember what I got out of it. Like a cute cutscene or something? Yeah, that wasn't worth all the pain I just went through. And I audibly laughed when the game had the audacity of informing me that there were more floors available. Bro, who do you think I am? Why would I play more of this after I beat it already? I'm not gonna waste too much time here, but this game's social mechanics blow cock. It reeks of a development team trying to emulate a formula from another successful franchise, but not really understanding nor willing to put in the effort to make it work. What is the point of adding these type of things if you're not gonna commit to making them enjoyable? Soul levels are a numerical value that measure how close you are with any given party member. You can increase your soul level with any given character via social hangouts or picking specific dialogue options. This sounds relatively inoffensive and hard to fuck up, but trust me, Soul Hackers finds a way. So, you remember how I told you that I only finished one sector of the Soul Matrix? Believe it or not, I would have finished more if given the opportunity. But I couldn't do that because this game decided to lock progression of the Soul Matrix behind soul levels. The problem with doing that is that you are literally ruining the entire reason for having dialogue options. The point is to give the players some freedom, let them choose what they actually believe in. But with this game, there's no such fucking thing. The game incentivizes you to choose this honestly when a soul dialogue option appears, because if you agree with someone a little too much, you aren't going to be able to progress the dungeon. And this is a really problematic thing when you consider that there are actual rewards and combat improvements for progressing a character's floors. Why even do this? This is contradictory game design, and it's insane to me. The actual social hangouts aren't much good anyway. I stopped doing them soon after my playthrough began, once I realized it was just going to be Ringo and a random party member busting each other's balls at the bar for 2 minutes at a time. It feels so fucking lazy. What's the point of having this bustling metropolis and using literally only the bar for hangout events? This is gonna sound like an exaggeration, and it probably is, but I don't think there's anything truly enjoyable about this game's gameplay. The more I sit down and think about it, every facet of this game bores me. Even the stuff I didn't feel the need to mention. It always has me feeling like, why would I come back to this game? What about this game makes me want to ever revisit? The sense of accomplishment isn't there. I mean, I did get a little bit of euphoria out of stacking demons and figuring out how to get my stacks absurdly high, and the commander skills were kind of interesting to play with, but are those two facets of gameplay interesting enough to keep me playing the game or ever picking it up again? I mean, realistically, they barely kept me playing the game as is, not to mention of giving it a second playthrough. Out of everything in this game that disappointed me, the gameplay itself had to be highest on the list. You know what the actual worst part of this game is? It's not the gameplay, the story, its music, or anything you might think. It's this fucking navigator.
Look! Enemy! Lucky us! Get ready! Let's take it. Now we can relax.
Shut up!
Careful!
Shut up!
Enemy!
Shut the fuck up!
Yes, this is what I'll be dedicating this video's intermission to. When I walked into the Soul Matrix for the first time and was formally introduced to Mimi, I immediately knew this was going to be a bad game. The addition of Mimi revealed so much to me about this game. You know, I always had a scintilla of suspicion regarding this game. I was under the impression developers were not confident in their own product. Mimi was when I realized I was absolutely correct. Mimi exists in this form for no other reason than we wanted to get an animal mascot in the JRPG group. This game is enforcing this trope for no reason whatsoever. It's so clear they wanted Fig to be on the missions but not actually fight, and this is how they got to it. A goddamn drone that takes the form of an owl. Seriously, can we leave this dog shit trope behind? When is this going away? We don't need this. It's like you have a checklist of mandatory JRPG stuff and really decided that this needed to be checked off. Jesus Christ. And you know, it's one thing to have this unnecessary bullshit in the game, but a whole other thing to have it constantly talking to me while I'm roaming dungeons. To have it disseminate useless information to me. To have it contribute nothing 99% of the time. And to have it so I can't disable its fucking voice. I think it's genuinely impressive to make a navigator/tutorial bot that gives Omochao, Navi, and Teddy a run for their money.
Careful! Look out! Phew. Now we can relax. Incoming! Look out! Incoming! Now we can relax. It's dangerous! Careful! Now we can relax. Phew. Over there! Careful! Look out!
Please, I beg you, shut the fuck up. I'm begging you to shut the fuck up. Coming into this game, I expected it to pull through on at least one thing. Its music. I'm very accustomed to walking away from a Mega 10 game and falling in love with the soundtrack. And I was even more excited after realizing this was going to be a game composed by music studio Monica. Monica is the brainchild of industry veteran Keiichi Okabe. It's a studio specializing in the production of music for video games and anime. More specifically, you probably know them for their work on the Nier games. To this day, those tracks still give me chills. It's powerful music. It touches your soul in a way that I can't truly describe. And every vital moment or cutscene in these games that had this music was accentuated by this music. So needless to say, coming to Soul Hackers 2, I had absurdly high expectations of this studio. And regrettably, I don't think they hit the mark on this one. Soul Hackers 2 features a soundtrack rich with electronic sound, it's not afraid to let the guitars blare, the vocal performances are beautiful, and the game just goes into whatever genre it feels like. You see, I'm really desperate to give Monica the benefit of the doubt here. There are really high moments in this soundtrack, and they know how to make good music. When I booted up this game the first time and I heard Hopeless Call, I was on the moon. This orgasmic feeling in my ears right now, this is exactly what I expected from this game, and I thought the game would continue to be like this. those fucking vocals, this futuristic electronic sound, the damn synths. And you know what? The song manages to perfectly encapsulate the futuristic but bleak nature of the game and the city in which you find yourself in. You can't have an opening theme like that and never match up to it again. That is a crime against humanity. But perhaps that's what makes it all the more difficult to admit that while the Soul Hackers 2 soundtrack does have songs that are of this level of quality, it also has an equal amount of throwaways and legitimately unnoteworthy music. And when I say unnoteworthy music, I'm not just cherry picking this shit either. I'm not just talking about songs that show up maybe once or twice. I think much of this game's most important music is borderline bad or even annoying. For one, I absolutely despise the dungeon music in this game. I can't tell you how much of that is based in hating the actual dungeons, but there's just no way you wouldn't get tired of hearing this after 40 fucking hours. There was absolutely no reason to have one single dungeon theme across multiple dungeons. Games haven't done this for decades, so why are we doing this in 2022? In fact, I don't think this dungeon theme switches up until the 24th Municipal Ward. And while we're on the topic of dungeons, I didn't forget about the fucking Soul Matrix. I don't care if it's a side dungeon, I think this shit is inexcusable. Do you know how unbearable it is to go through the Soul Matrix? There's no reason to use literally one theme. You made the already monotonous Soul Matrix somehow even more painful. Listen, I know that the game is going for an ambient feel and isn't trying to make any of these dungeon themes stand out too much, but that doesn't matter. You have made them standout tracks by the mere virtue of having me listen to this shit for 30 hours. The only difference is, these tracks are standing out for the wrong reason. And going back to the Soul Matrix, this may shock you, but I know an example of another video game with a grindy side dungeon that figured out this music thing in like 2016. Crazy idea, they gave each layer of the side dungeon a new soundtrack? That's like 5 whole new songs. Crazy how they realized I didn't want near the same fucking thing the whole goddamn time. Oh really? You thought the Megaten comparisons were gonna stop? You thought I was gonna stop mentioning Persona and SMT in this video? I'm not going to. Those are good games. I like good games. Furthermore, let's talk about battle themes. I know I'm gonna get pushback for this, but I do not really fuck with the battle themes in this game. These are well-produced songs, they aren't lazy either, but I just don't vibe with them. I just hear these themes and I think, well, that's definitely a battle theme. It's one of the battle themes of all time, for sure. The art of the battle theme is really important in a JRPG. I don't think you can name a classic JRPG that doesn't have a breadth of classic battle themes. Sure, we all get sick of hearing them after so long, but you'll never forget the first time you hear it or how you feel revisiting it and hearing it again. With Soul Hackers 2, I've almost never felt anything about any of these battle themes. Usually you're meant to hate a battle theme after it's been overused, but when it comes to this game's music, I have yet to even feel that. Instead, I just feel this disturbing level of indifference towards it all. And that's probably what makes writing about this game's battle themes the most difficult. It's an important thing I want to discuss, but there's nothing much to say about it. I mean, I will concede, I really like the final boss music, even though nothing else in this game piques my interest in the same way. You know, I'm starting to get the feeling that I just like soundtracks in this game that remind me of something out of Nier. And you know what? I'm okay with that. If that's what it takes to make this game's music good, go ahead. Please keep doing it. I'm begging you. Moving on, I was also not enamored with much of the music in the shops in this game. I firmly believe if I'm going to constantly visit an area, the music shouldn't piss me off. Most games understand this. Not Soul Hackers 2. The problem with Soul Hackers 2 and its music rears its head most aggressively with the shop music. And the problem is that it just feels uninspired and safe. In particular, I feel as if I've heard the Zafiro shop theme in a dozen soundtracks before. It just strikes me as a refusal to push any boundaries. Like, were your instructions make the most generic clothing store music of all time? Fuck, even the little I played of Soul Hackers 1 had better music than this. Actually, we don't even need to compare this to a game from 20 years ago. Let's compare it to a game that came out 1 year beforehand, Shin Megami Tensei 5. You are not going to remember any of these shop themes in SH2, but I guarantee you, most people were immediately enamored upon hearing Cadaver's Hollow. I know some people get on me for shit like this, claiming that I like to point out small things and blow them out of proportion, but the thing is, these may appear to be unimportant things, but they really aren't. You can often find out much more about a game by examining the less pronounced details than you can looking at a bigger picture. Obviously, everyone knows that the battle music and opening themes are meant to sound amazing. But a true test of your dedication comes into simple shit like a shop. Even though you know the player is only going to spend 30 seconds in that goddamn shop, were you still so dedicated to your craft that you decided the music had to be a banger anyway? And once again, I am deadly serious about this shop music because little shit like that proves a lot. I do, however, want to end this section on a high note. The music in this game is one of its stronger suits after all, even if I am wholly unimpressed by a lot of it. This game's music has moments where it does some heavy lifting for the game's mediocre story. There's still a lot of brilliance in this soundtrack, that much is undeniable. Eyes of the Iron Mask is easily one of the best tracks in the entire game. It takes all the game's strongest musical suits and shoves them into this 2-minute 38-second epic. The song is fucking intimidating. It almost makes Iron Mask not a joke of a villain. It has this grand feeling while refusing to abandon the futuristic sound that predominates the game's soundtrack. That's another thing I need to give credit to the soundtrack for. It's very loyal to the game's themes. Just when you think it's veering off course, it always returns to that futuristic sound I keep referencing. At the risk of sounding ignorant or even downright conspiratorial, I wonder how much of this game's soundtrack has actually suffered due to the failures of Ishida and Hirata. I don't even think it's that absurd for me to imply that their lack of solid direction or vision for this game could have had a legitimate effect on the music we got. Hirata and Ishida sent Monica storylines, character designs, and themes to help set the tone for the game's sound. But somehow, with this team of talented composers, we still got a stagnant amount of middling tracks that all screamed, "We didn't know what to do, so we went with the safest option." I can't comprehend how it ended up this way. I'm in such denial that I am literally proposing a conspiracy that the producers fucked up. And to be fair, the odds aren't that low. Monica shined bright at many points in Soul Hackers 2, but they also fell flat a surprising amount of times. Soul Hackers 2 does many things wrong. That's pretty much the trend with this game and this video. However, if there's one thing the game manages to do pretty correctly, it's the visuals. Almost everything in this game looks pretty fucking good. I'm pretty confident in saying I stayed with this game way longer than I should have just because I liked looking at the game. Truth be told, I'm a big sucker for anything with a cyberpunk aesthetic. So when you take that and you mix it in with standard Megaton occult nonsense, you get a really cool result. I mean, just look at the intro to this fucking game. You can't tell me this didn't draw you in. I still watch that opening cinematic and trick myself into thinking, wow, this game looks really cool. Seriously, there's so much going on in this game's visual department that it distracts me from the fact of this game just being bad overall. The user interface? It's okay. I'm not blown away by it, but it's certainly better than average. I'm a big fan of the character portraits that show up when the dialogue is going on. These look great and convey emotion. The dialogue boxes are also very in line with the game's style. I appreciate the little purple shadow it has, alongside the decision to put some lower opacity triangle designs inside the actual dialogue box. In battles, the interface does an excellent job of highlighting the important details while keeping things as cinematic as possible. It does a brilliant job of bringing attention to the character's personality while still keeping key details on your screen. The only part of the game where I did find the user interface to be outright annoying would be dungeon crawling, unsurprisingly. Namely, because of how the game handles your map. To be honest, if your map starts taking up half the screen, don't be surprised. This shit gets outrageous. There's also this unbelievably ugly and unnecessary Mimi icon on the top right. I get the point is to have it serve as some sort of visual indicator or warning of danger, but you know, I can tell the danger is approaching me by the monstrous figure literally chasing me. This owl in the right corner just takes up fucking space. And a lot of the general menus you find in this game are really just inoffensive. Nothing worth really discussing or writing home about. I can't really give you much from this, but you know what, that's okay. Not everyone can have UIs or menus in the same level as certain other games. But hey, Soul Hackers 2 gives a decent shot at it. When we had characters first revealed for this game, I felt something familiar about this art style. I could never put my finger on it, not until recently. As it turns out, the character designer for this game is Shiro Miwa. I had no idea who this guy was, so I decided to do some research. I quickly understood where I knew him from. He was the same artist who designed the characters in the 2016 anime Key Sniper. The anime itself wasn't very memorable, but I remember absolutely loving how the characters looked. And it seems that this one aspect of Miwa's career hasn't changed. He's still creating characters so visually appealing that people like me outright forget how badly the character may have actually been written. Ringo looks fucking amazing. I don't even know how you come up with this. Whether it's the neon green of her entire design, the fitting digital markings on her leg, the black hairband, the stylish suit that she wears, or even that little blue tie she always wears. Her entire design strikes me as daring. It really tethers the edge, and only someone who's really good at character design could make this work. I can't lie, I spent a decent amount of my first hours of the playthrough just oogling at her design, because it's just so fun to look at. Especially because she's constantly changing appearance in subtle ways, such as when her eyes glow intensely or her entire suit starts pulsating a neon color. All this while having a really sick comp that changes between a gun and a katana whenever she needs it to. She's dope as hell. Iron Mask is another great example of this. His design is so close to being fucking tacky, but something about it just works. He wears this damn suit with a standout design that's only on one half of his jacket. It's another bold choice in character design that could go really wrong really easily, but instead it just ends up working perfectly and just looks right alongside his actual mask. In fact, that's the trend you're gonna notice with most character designs in this game. Shiro Miwa knows how to keep every character design looking consistent. Aside from that honestly goofy looking double barrel shotgun that Iron Mask loves to pull out, his design fucking rocks. And Melody, she might have my favorite design in this game. Melody has this very cold and tough exterior. She often comes across as heartless, but at the same time, Melody has a well-concealed, softer, feminine, and dare I say, motherly side. I really fuck with her design because it sort of highlights both sides of her. Her appearance has always struck me because she dresses like someone ready to kill, but keeps her own feminine twist to it. Look at her red button jacket with the purple cuffs and black ruffles. The white pouches and bags she has on her at all times, her gun holster around her legs, her cool little thorny rose ear cuffs. Now obviously, the likely reason she looks like this is because everyone thought she looked hot, which is fair, but I don't care. Melody's design conveys her deadly disposition while also showing us that there's something else hidden underneath all of it. She carries so many items that could be used to assist in murder, all while showing off in the most stylish and sexy fit imaginable. I think it's pretty dope. She also wields sais that match the color scheme of hers, and it's pretty awesome. And when I talk about designs pushing the edge, Saizo has to be my favorite example of this. I feel like if most people attempted to do what was done with Saizo here, they'd just fucking fail. There is so much about his design I could easily see myself dissing if the wrong person drew it. The all-white suit with swirl designs on one side, the absolutely ridiculous scarf he has on, the white bowling hat with the red-black feather, his borderline goofy-looking Tommy gun comp. I feel like I should be dissing him, like I should hate how this fucker looks, but I love everything about it. And I fuck so heavily with the green hair constantly covering his eyes. I think that's just cool, especially with how the game uses showing off one of his eyes to convey his emotion at any moment in time. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Swagger's 2 looks good. It looks pretty good. And keep in mind, this is coming from the guy who played it on 30 FPS on his PS4. I was impressed even with that being the hardware I used. But at the end of the day, looking the part is not enough. It's really hard to give a fuck about this game's beauty if the actual content of the game is near nothing. Swagger's 2 is very much definition of putting lipstick on a pig, and it's pretty sad because a lot of talent is being wasted on this when it could have gone to something way better. At the end of the day, what even is Soul Hackers 2 but a forgettable mess? It's simply an amalgamation of wasted potential and creative bankruptcy. I don't know what Atlus was hoping to accomplish with this game. So much of the direction and plans for this game feel confused. This game should have been good, but it's as if the directors/producers failed to understand what makes these sort of games fun. Because while yes, they were attempting to do something grand here, just look at the music and visuals, they hired Miwa and they hired Monica. But even those aspects of the game feel like they were held back by a myriad of core issues. Whether it's the story it's trying to tell, or the gameplay it's presenting us with, it just feels like there's no greater vision here. I just imagine a bunch of dudes looking at a standard Persona/SMT game and just checking boxes to see if their game has almost all the same things. And perhaps the reason I'm so vitriolic toward this game isn't because of its mediocrity, but because of what will happen as a result of its mediocrity. Knowing Atlus, they're gonna see this as a signal to pull the plug on anything not SMT or Persona. Not to be a doomsayer, but the low sales of this game may have just killed several potential Megaten spin-offs, remakes, or original ideas. It's so abundantly clear that Atlus wasn't willing to go all in on making this a fantastic game. And Christ, the lack of confidence on the side of these people shows. The absolute cowardice to be blessed with decades of hindsight, stunning character designs, and a mandate to make something new and original. But you decide to just ape on the IP of a 25-year-old game and slap a 2 on it. So afraid to do anything on your own that you made this garbage. I think Tokyo Mirage Sessions is fucking awful, but at least that game was its own thing. And I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but in many ways, that game is outright better than Soul Hackers 2. Believe me, I get no enjoyment out of saying that. Soul Hackers 2 is a 4 out of 10. From the way I talked about it, that may seem like a high score, but my issue with this game has always been how forgettable it is. It's not good enough or bad enough to be remembered by anyone. And that's simply the legacy this game will invariably leave behind. A failed sequel that no one really asked for, no one really remembered, and no one really cared about. And it's sad because it could have been so much more. But all we really got was a slightly below average game. What a waste of time.
You